I divorced the man I had been in love with for 10 years. In the 7th year of secretly loving Eric, he said to me, let's get married. In the 3rd year after getting married, I said to him, let's get divorced. Chapter 1. In the 10th year of loving Eric, I brought up the topic of divorce. It all started when he didn't come home after work. I drove to his company to find him and saw him standing with a girl outside the building. I recognized her immediately as his ex-girlfriend, who had been involved with Eric for 5 years. They stood on the steps, Eric looking handsome in his suit, and the girl with her wavy hair appearing charming and affectionate. Although they didn't hold hands or embrace, there was an intimacy that kept others at bay. I glanced at our chat history. The last message I sent him was, "Are you coming home for dinner tonight?" He never replied. He had been ignoring my messages for a while now, always claiming to be busy, but apparently, he wasn't too busy to chat with another girl. I didn't approach them. I just stood there quietly observing. Eric's smile seemed unfamiliar to me. It suddenly dawned on me that he hadn't genuinely smiled at me for a long time. Despite being the closest of spouses, he always came home with a cold expression on his face. I thought it was because he was tired from work, but it turned out that I wasn't the one who could make him smile anymore. He glanced at me casually, and his expression froze. Then he said something to the girl. Her smile faded, and she waved at him before looking at me and walking away. Eric walked over briskly, opened the car door, and sat in the passenger seat with a furrowed brow. "What are you doing here?" he exclaimed. I replied calmly, "I came to pick you up after work." "Didn't you say you wouldn't let Jenny into our company?" Eric's brow furrowed even more. "Jenny is a Yale graduate and has worked in Wall Street investment banking for years. Where else can you find someone like her? Why wouldn't I let her come?" He grew impatient. "Can you stop having only love and romance on your mind all the time? Look at what she's become now. Multiple companies are fighting to hire her. If it weren't for my connection with her, she might not have come at all." His disdain was evident in his words. I looked at the flowing cars in the distance without saying a word. When we arrived home, Eric didn't speak to me either. He slammed the study door shut with force. He was angry. He didn't realize that he only used anger as a cover-up when he felt guilty. Perhaps only I, who had been by his side for 10 years, could understand him in this way. But sometimes, I hate myself for understanding him so well. It's better to be confused than to be painfully aware. Neither of us spoke first, and I didn't create a scene as I usually would. We just engaged in a cold war, separated by a closed door. After a moment, the study door was forcefully pushed open, and Eric, with a stern face, said, "What do you want, after all?" "I'm telling you, I can't dismiss Jenny. You either accept it or we get a divorce. Whoever leaves, we can both survive without each other." "Diana, let me tell you," I interrupted him, speaking softly, "there's no need to dismiss her. Let's get a divorce." Eric paused. "What did you say?" He seemed to chuckle in anger, a hint of mockery in the corners of his eyes and lips. "Diana, I'm not joking with you. You've had enough. There's no discussion about Jenny. Don't threaten me now and come back crying later," he sneered, like a dog. Eric always spoke without mincing words. The first time he argued with me like this, I cried in the room all day long, feeling as if my heart was breaking. But now, there was only a faint pain in my heart, quickly replaced by numbness. I didn't argue with him. I took out the divorce agreement from my bag and placed it on the table. "I've already signed the agreement. The house goes to you, cash and the car go to me, roughly split evenly. If you have any other requests, we can discuss them." Eric fell silent. He looked at me with disbelief, then that astonishment turned into anger. He grabbed the agreement aggressively and glanced at it coldly. "Fine, you've got guts, Diana. Once I sign, there's no turning back. Think it through." I handed him the pen. Eric's face immediately turned dark. He roughly snatched the pen from my hand and hastily signed his name on it, then threw the agreement in my face. "Tomorrow, we're getting divorced." "Tomorrow," he angrily exclaimed. "Anyone who doesn't go is a damn loser." I nodded. "Tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. I've already made an appointment." He paused, and I didn't say anything. I closed the door and went back to the guest bedroom. I could hear the sound of things being smashed outside the door, so I covered my eyes with my arm. How did it come to this? Clearly, in the beginning, I also wanted to be happy. Chapter 2. Eric and I had a flash marriage. For him, this relationship came unexpectedly, but for me, I had secretly loved him for 5 years. At that time, he had just broken up with Jenny. When they were together, I never dared to interfere. It was only after they broke up that I had the courage to attend gatherings where he was present. During a class reunion, he drank a lot and ended up getting drunk. I knew it was because of Jenny. At that time, Jenny had just received her acceptance letter from Yale University. But Eric had taken over his father's company and planned to develop it domestically. They couldn't convince each other, and after a heated argument, the couple who had been in love for 5 years went their separate ways. When leaving, several friends who knew that I had always liked him hinted for me to send him home. I had no choice but to call a car and support him, struggling to get him back home. No matter how good Eric's physique was, he was still a tall man over 1.8 m, pressing me down, making it impossible for me to reach the light switch. In the darkness, he slurred in my ear, "Jay." I couldn't hear clearly in my daze and thought he was calling my name. With the drunken heat lingering around my ears, my body stiffened, and when he leaned in for a kiss, I didn't dodge. Early the next morning, while Eric was still asleep, I hurriedly left his house. He didn't contact me either. Just when I thought it was just a fleeting encounter, a month later, my period still hadn't come. I reassured myself that it was only once, it couldn't be that coincidental. But after taking the test, I saw 2 lines. I took a day off and stayed at home and finally gathered the courage to send Eric a WeChat message. I didn't want to force him into anything, nor did I want to ask him for money. I just felt that this was our child and he had the right to know. For a day and night, Eric didn't reply to me. Just when I had lost all hope, he suddenly called me. On the call, his voice was devoid of emotion. "I will take responsibility. Diana, let's get married." I still remember the feeling I had when I heard those words from him. It was the first time I realized what heart-fluttering truly meant. As if fireworks were exploding in my heart, it felt even more dizzying than winning the jackpot. Suppressing my overwhelming joy, I pretended to be calm and asked him, "Do you like me?" "I don't want you to be with me just because you feel responsible." He replied without answering directly. Eric remained silent for a long time and then said, "Don't overthink it. I'll come find you later." After hanging up the phone, I tightly clenched my hands, and my mind was filled with memories of that spirited young man on the high school basketball court. Love knows no reason, it just deepens. I don't know when exactly I started liking Eric, whether it was when I saw the glistening sweat on his forehead while playing basketball or when he smiled and placed a bubble tea on my desk, saying, "Brother, this one's on me." All I know is that I have liked him for far too long. It's like a person wandering alone in the dark, finally seeing the first light of dawn. Even though his mother looked down on me because I got pregnant before marriage and didn't even give us a dowry or accept my tea for the change of address ceremony, even though we couldn't ultimately keep that child, but at that time, I truly felt like the happiest person in the world. Being with him turned all the bitterness into sweetness. How foolish I was. In the darkness, a bitter smile appeared at the corner of my mouth. Little did I know, in just 3 short years, the dream would shatter. Chapter 3. The next morning, I had already packed up and was ready to go, but Eric was still not up. I knocked on the door for a while before he opened it, wearing gray pajamas and a look of impatience on his face. "Are you in such a hurry?" I glanced at my watch. "If we're late, we'll have to reschedule." I paused for a moment. "You've been talking about getting divorced all this time, and now it's finally happening, aren't you happy?" "I'm happy," he forced a smile through gritted teeth. "Of course I'm happy. Jenny has also returned, and you're quite considerate, finding a new place just in time." I nodded. "Let's go then." On the way, neither of us spoke a word. Eric had a constant frown on his face, and I had grown accustomed to it. I don't know when exactly it started, but we rarely talked anymore. At first, I loved talking to him. After liking him for so many years, I had accumulated so many words I wanted to share with him. If I saw a cat on the roadside, a beautiful flower, or a peculiar-shaped cloud in the sky, I would send him pictures. But he rarely replied. Usually, it would take a long time for him to reach out to me when he needed something, and he would reluctantly reply with a simple "yeah." I couldn't deceive myself. He was just not a talkative person by nature, because I had seen the conversations he had with Jenny on her social media, and it seemed like Eric became a person I didn't recognize, someone witty and humorous who responded instantly to all her topics. Over time, I stopped sending him messages as often. When we arrived at the Civil Affairs Bureau, the mediator, an older lady, tried to reconcile us for a long time. Is your relationship irreparable? Eric was about to speak, but I smiled and answered, no. We had a flash marriage without any emotional foundation to begin with. Now it feels inappropriate, and we can't go on like this. Eric glanced at me, his expression complicated. The mediator tried to persuade us for a while, but I blocked all her attempts. Finally, she sighed and said, take a month of cooling off period and think about it again. Young couples like you, with the man's talent and the woman's beauty, are so well matched. You young people are just impulsive. Go back and think more about the good aspects of each other. I thought about it. Eric is handsome, he was the school heartthrob in high school. He comes from a good family, his parents own a company and have plenty of money. In college, he used to pick up Jenny from school in his sports car, while we still took the bus. He has a good personality, surrounded by a group of friends, and there's never a dull moment. He is a good person, except when it comes to me. He treats me poorly. When we left the Civil Affairs Bureau, the midday sunlight pierced my eyes, causing tears to well up. Eric thought I was crying and finally revealed a smirk of satisfaction. Regretting it now? Too late, Diana. He stood in front of me with a condescending posture, hands in his pockets. I won't turn back. I wiped the corner of my eye and drove home with him. Once we got home, Eric sat on the couch with his legs crossed and, out of habit, he ordered me around, get me a glass of water. I ignored him and came out of the bedroom with my suitcase in hand. Where are you going? He frowned. I found a new place, and I'm moving out today. I paused for a moment and continued, I've kept all the things you bought for me in the bedroom cabinet. Who the hell cares? Eric suddenly exploded. I forced a smile. Since we're getting divorced, let's say our goodbyes properly. Take care of yourself. Drink less alcohol, your stomach isn't good. Who do you think you are, minding my business? He abruptly stood up, grabbed my suitcase, opened the door, and threw it outside. If you're leaving, then leave now. His eyebrows furrowed, his eyes filled with pent-up anger. I looked at the suitcase on the ground, stunned for a moment. Then I stopped speaking, walked over, picked up the suitcase, and entered the elevator without looking back at him. The gaze behind me was scorching, as if it wanted to burn a hole in my back, but in the end, it was completely severed by the closing elevator doors. Chapter 4. I didn't want the house because I didn't want anything to do with Eric anymore. I didn't want to see his things, smell his scent, or think about anything related to him. In fact, I had already made up my mind about the divorce. Eric never liked me. I always knew that. I just kept thinking that after so many years, even if he had a heart of stone, it would eventually melt for me. But after all these years, he still doesn't love me, and my warmth has completely run out. I finally understand that some people are truly irreplaceable. Perhaps he can see Jenny smile, but no matter how hard I try, he can't see mine. I moved into the previously rented house. Before I could even finish unpacking, Eric's mother called. Eric, did you buy the stomach medicine? I heard from him that his stomach hasn't been well lately. It's not me saying this, Diana. I never agreed when Eric wanted to marry you. How can a decent girl get pregnant before marriage? If it were my daughter, I would have beaten her to death. It's embarrassing. I'm telling you, our family can't break the line. If you can't have children, you better say it early. Eric is still young. Don't delay him. I clenched my phone. Eric's family is wealthy, and his mother has never looked favorably upon my family. My parents had to put on a smiley face and endure her cold treatment when they went to visit. Over the years, she has always disliked me, no matter how hard I try to please her. In fact, she has said these things before every time we meet. Every time she calls me, she repeats how I climbed up to Eric and how difficult it was for their family. Eric never speaks up for me. He only tells me to be obedient and filial to his mother because his mother has already made many sacrifices to accept me. So I always endured it. But this time, I don't need to endure anymore. I said expressionlessly, we are already divorced. I'm not obligated to buy medicine for him anymore. By the way, you didn't give birth to me, nor did you raise me. You have no right to meddle in my affairs. If you can't stand me, I suggest you poke your own eyes out and stop looking. After saying that, I didn't care about the reaction on the other end and hung up, blocking the number. After some thought, I left all the WeChat groups related to Eric's family and deleted and blocked all their contact information, including his. After doing all this, I finally breathed a sigh of relief and lay down on the bed. Divorce wasn't as painful as I imagined. Eric always liked to threaten me with divorce during arguments. It seemed like he had me under his control, knowing that I wouldn't leave him, and he used my love to hurt me without restraint. And as he expected, the first time he threatened me like that, I was genuinely scared. He was right. I kneeled before him like a dog, admitting my mistakes, promising to change, and willing to do anything as long as he didn't leave me. I covered my eyes with my palms, feeling a damp warmth, but even heartache has its limits. Repeatedly, that pain became numb through endless repetition. The chain that pierced through my bones and flesh, carrying rotten blood, finally left me. Now all that's left is liberation. Chapter 5. Eric didn't contact me anymore. It's like he completely disappeared from my life. Until 2 weeks later, a classmate suddenly approached me and asked if I wanted to join the class reunion tomorrow night. Initially, I wanted to refuse. I really didn't want to see Eric again. But then I thought, it's not me who was in the wrong, and I don't need to avoid him either. So I agreed to go. During the class reunion, I was talking with other people when the door suddenly swung open. Eric stepped in. He was still wearing the suit he had on during the day, tailored and fitting, with just the top button of his collar undone. Coupled with his black hair, he exuded a refined charm with a hint of mischief. Even without saying a word, his long-standing position of power made his presence dominant. Following behind him was Jenny, who was dressed immaculately. As soon as they entered, everyone started making a commotion. Oh, Eric and the campus beauty are back together. I knew you two couldn't break up. It was such a big fuss back then. Come sit over here. That's right, I remember when Jenny went abroad, Eric almost ended up in the hospital from drinking. He's been waiting for her all these years. Years, hasn't he? When I married Eric, he said he didn't like formalities, so we didn't have a wedding ceremony. After marriage, he never posted anything related to me on social media, and even when we went out together, he would keep his distance from me. It's ironic that we've been married for 3 years, but besides a few close friends, no one knows we're together. Eric's gaze pierced through the crowd and landed on me, his eyes filled with mockery, a smirk on his lips. I didn't look at him and turned to talk to the person next to me. His face turned dark, and he sat down with Jenny. Why is Jenny back? I heard you've been doing really well abroad, planning to come back and contribute to the motherland, someone joked. Jenny brushed aside her wavy hair and smiled ambiguously. Now that I'm this old, I should start thinking about settling down. My family has been urging me. She didn't mention anyone by name, but everyone burst into laughter. That's right, Eric has been waiting for you all these years. Now that you're back, good things are about to happen, right? Jenny remained silent, blushing and lowering her head, smiling. Hey, Eric, you're really sentimental. But our Jenny is an independent woman now, both talented and beautiful. You two are a perfect match. But speaking of beauty, I think Diana is also beautiful. Back in our class, there were often debates about who the campus beauty was, you or Jenny. I was about to speak when Eric sneered, what good is just being beautiful? Some people only have love and romance in their minds all day long. They'd become foolish as housewives. No wonder no one loves them. My face turned pale. I knew he was talking about me. When he started his business, he was very busy. If I also pursued a career, it would have been difficult for us to be together. For him, I turned down all job offers and focused on taking care of him at home. Everyone fell silent, and then a classmate intervened, trying to defuse the situation. We shouldn't say it like that. Diana also received offers from several major companies back then. She made millions from her university projects. I remember one company even offered her a salary of $3 million a year. But why didn't you take any of those offers? He curiously asked. Did you get married? Eric froze and turned to look at me. I lowered my gaze and calmly replied, yes, I married a scumbag. I rejected all those opportunities for him just so I could take care of him. But a scumbag is a scumbag, no matter how much you sacrifice for them. Thankfully, I cut my losses in time. A female classmate nearby empathized, that's right, some men are like that. When they get married, they want a nanny to take care of them. After a few years, they complain that their wives aren't independent enough and end up with a clingy, dependent woman. Ugh, trash like that deserves to grow old alone. The topic quickly changed, and classmates began discussing their own relationships and marriages, warning against being too love-struck, or else they might end up with such scumbags. I had always been submissive to Eric, so this was the first time I sarcastically criticized him. He stared straight at me, seeming somewhat bewildered. He wanted to say something, but his voice disappeared amidst the noisy chatter. The gathering came to an end, and I got into my car to leave. As I started the engine, someone knocked on my car window. One of Eric's friends looked at me with a troubled expression. Sister-in-law, Eric's stomach is acting up again. Can you take him home? I furrowed my brow. What about Jenny? He hesitated for a moment. She offered to take Eric, but he refused. Eric listens to you the most. I looked to the side. Not far away, Eric stood at the hotel entrance, bathed in orange light. When his gaze reached me, it seemed as if he was scalded and quickly averted his eyes. Jenny stood beside him, saying something, but he seemed absent-minded, furrowing his brow and waving his hand dismissively. We already divorced, I withdrew my gaze. I'm sorry, find someone else. Sister-in-law, the man wanted to say something more, but I nodded at him and drove away without another word. In the rearview mirror, I saw Eric watching me intently, slightly bowing his head, his face looking somewhat pale. I didn't look at him again and continued driving. I care so much about Eric that even the people around him know it. His stomach problem stems from when Jenny left, and he turned to drinking. In these 3 years, I transformed from a lazy person who couldn't even boil water to a housewife who can cook and make soup for him in various ways just to take better care of his health. I buy all his stomach medicine and divide them into daily doses, stuffing them into his clothes and calling him to remind him to take his medication. When he forgot to bring his medicine on a business trip and had a severe stomachache in the middle of the night, I braved the freezing winter to catch the early morning flight and deliver the medicine to him. But by the time I arrived, he was already asleep. I stood at the door for hours, waiting until my body was covered in snow. But when Eric woke up and opened the door, he just frowned impatiently and said, "Give me the medicine and go." It was on that trip back that I slipped and lost my child. The pain gnaws at my heart like insects, not tearing it apart, but the subtle pain is impossible to ignore. Sometimes I don't understand myself either. I'm not this kind of person, so why do I become so lowly and pathetic when it comes to him? But emotions are irrational, they can easily destroy a person's principles. With one smile from him, all my boundaries crumble, leaving me at his mercy. But my love has been completely worn away. That Diana who used to be so full of him in her heart and eyes has been slowly eroded by him. Chapter 6. The next day, just as I was about to leave, I received a call from my parents. They said that Eric's parents were also here and asked me to come home to talk. I had anticipated this day would come. Divorce is not a trivial matter, it involves two families. Even though I didn't want to go back, I knew that sooner or later, I had to put an end to it. But in just 2 short weeks of not being home, this once familiar place felt somewhat strange to me. As I entered the house, I suddenly felt a sense of oppression. Both sets of parents were sitting on the couch, and Eric sat on the side, smoking and remaining silent. Perhaps they could sense that I was serious this time. Surprisingly, Eric's mother didn't directly scold me. She just furrowed her brow and said, "Diana, I know you young people have your temper, but divorce is not something to be taken lightly. How can you just say divorce so easily?" I chuckled lightly. "Auntie, you should ask your son about that. Divorce was his idea. If I remember correctly, this is already the 13th time Eric has mentioned divorce to me. Since he wants a divorce so badly, I can only grant him that wish." Eric's mother was taken aback, forcing a smile. "Eric is just being childish. He hasn't grown up yet, still immature." "Is that so?" I responded coolly. "He's actually a year older than me." Does he have some kind of developmental problem if, at 25 years old, he's still not mature? Eric's mother was left speechless. Eric's father coughed. Diana, this child Eric doesn't know any better. As parents, we apologize on his behalf. But when problems arise in a marriage, it's definitely not all one-sided. It takes two to clap. Uncle, let me give you a slap, will you say it won't make a sound? I said firmly. Since we were already divorced, I had no reason to keep silent anymore. I decided to say whatever I wanted to say. I walked up to Eric and sternly said, Eric, stop pretending to be dead. Tell your parents what exactly I did to deserve all this. Your ex-girlfriend came back, and you said you didn't like a homemaker like me who only knows about love and family. You said I wasn't independent enough, but wasn't it family who said you had health issues and asked me to take care of you for all these years? I've been doing the laundry and cooking at home, preparing 3 meals a day in different ways because you have a stomach problem. As someone who loves spicy food, I haven't cooked anything spicy at home. Eric, be honest with yourself, is this my fault? Eric remained silent. His mother couldn't help but speak up. Don't just blame him. After all these years, you haven't had any children either. The child back then didn't make it, who knows if it was. I abruptly turned around and raised my voice. Yes, I got pregnant before we were married, but pregnancy is not something I can do alone. If Eric didn't want it, could I force him? Why has it all become my fault? You say the child didn't make it, why don't you ask your son why my child didn't make it? He went on a business trip without taking his medication for his stomach. In the middle of the winter, I rushed to the airport in the early morning to deliver it, but he fell asleep and didn't open the door. I stood in the snow for 3 hours, and he didn't even say a word to let me leave the medicine and go. My feet were frozen and numb, and I lost the baby when I fell. I want to ask you, whose fault is it really? Is it mine? I didn't intend to cry, but the emotions that had been suppressed for too long poured out uncontrollably. Even I couldn't contain them. Did I do something wrong by giving my all? Why does loving someone turn into a mistake in the end? Almost on the verge of collapse, I shouted, Eric, tell me, what did I do wrong? My mother stood up, shocked, and asked Eric with a trembling voice, didn't you say it was her accidentally falling? I smiled bitterly, bowing my head. I was afraid you would scold him. I was just too foolish. My mother's eyes turned red in an instant, and she questioned Eric, her voice trembling. We haven't mistreated you all these years. We truly treated you as our own son. Your mother didn't give a dowry, didn't have a wedding ceremony, and had countless criticisms of Diana, and we didn't say anything. We knew Diana liked you. We just hoped you would treat her well, and this is how you treated her. Eric's face lost all color. I'm sorry, Mom. Don't call me Mom. I'm not your mother, my mother shouted loudly, her eyes filled with raging anger. My father's expression also turned grim, and he lowered his head, clenching his fists. Eric, I don't know what your intentions were in bringing your parents and mine here, but I haven't done anything to wrong you all these years. I don't want things to get uglier than they already are. Let's part ways amicably, I said wearily. Eric looked up, his emotions mixed in his eyes, and after a long silence, he whispered softly, You're not wrong, it's all my fault that we've come to this. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Diana, give me a chance to make it up to you. I won't be like this anymore. A hint of sarcasm appeared in my eyes. Of course, you didn't mean to. You just enjoyed the good I gave you while despising me. Eric, sometimes I really can't understand you. You haven't given me anything, and you have no right to decide anything for me. You just took advantage of my love and kept hurting me while looking down on me. I leaned in close to him and whispered softly, What exactly are you, Eric? On what grounds? Eric's eyes trembled, his face pale as if he had just recovered from a serious illness. Faced with my question, he couldn't utter a word, as if my words had pierced his heart like 1,000 arrows. For the first time, he fell into a disadvantageous position in front of me, his back bending inch by inch. Jenny came back. You clearly told me that you wouldn't let her into the company, and yet you kept her here. Eric, you were unfaithful to our marriage, broke your promises, and then blamed everything on me, saying that all I had on my mind was love and romance. Isn't this perfect now? I'll make way for you both. Eric urgently looked up. Jenny and I have nothing going on. We're just colleagues. I sneered, do you dare to say that you have no intentions of rekindling old feelings? Do normal colleagues need to have meals together every day and exchange messages on their phones while holding hands? Eric, do you think everyone is a fool, willingly fooled by you? Eric opened his mouth but couldn't say anything. I stood up and said indifferently, I've said everything I needed to say. I hope you won't bother me anymore. Just as I was about to walk out of the door, Eric called out to me. His voice trembled, as if the person who had always been composed and arrogant had finally been torn apart from the facade, only now realizing his true self. Diana, if I'm willing to change, can we still have a chance? I turned to look at him, and to my surprise, his eyes were filled with a hint of uneasiness. Eric had always been arrogant and dismissive in front of me, always in the dominant position in this relationship. I had never seen him so fearful before. It's too late, I said softly, and then closed the door. Chapter 7. After leaving Eric, I started sending out resumes, planning to find a job. Fortunately, it hasn't been too long since I graduated, and the projects I worked on were impressive enough. Many companies are still eager to hire me. In his eyes, I must be worthless, not even comparable to Jenny, so in this relationship, I constantly doubt myself, living in pain every day, questioning if I'm truly that inadequate. But now I realize that he doesn't get to decide who I am. I'm doing just fine. When I got home in the evening, I bought myself a small cake as a reward. In a few days, the cooling-off period will be over, and I can completely free myself from this relationship. But my good mood was interrupted by a phone call. Jenny's voice sounded distorted on the phone. Let's talk. I looked at the cake in my hand, feeling impatient. There's nothing for us to talk about. Don't you want me to keep coming to see you? Some things are better said and discussed, she said. Even though she was the one coming to see me, her attitude was still arrogant. I simply hung up the phone. The next day, when she called again, her attitude had improved. I just want to discuss some things with you. Just an hour, it won't take up much of your time. I didn't want to go, but I was afraid she would keep bothering me every day. I could only find a time to meet her. Jenny got straight to the point. I don't want you to contact Eric anymore. Since you've broken up, let it be a clean break. Don't keep lingering. I looked at this woman dressed in a white Chanel suit, her long hair elegantly styled, sophisticated yet professional. No wonder Eric liked her for so many years. You know that it was me who got together with him first. We had a good relationship, and if it wasn't for your interference, we might have reconciled long ago. Now that you're divorced, I don't want you to continue influencing him. I sneered. I blocked him long ago, so where's the lingering connection? Jenny looked incredulous. Eric has been restless these days. If it's not you constantly reaching out to him, then who could it be? I've noticed that you people are really good at making up stories. I laughed and said firmly, interfering? Interfering with what? You two broke up, and we got together. Is that considered interfering? Eric didn't marry me. Do you expect me to hold a knife to his throat and force him to be with me? Why don't you go ask him about it? As for what you said about me reaching out to him. I put my coffee down and looked at Jenny disdainfully. Rest assured, you can keep a close eye on him since you like him so much. I'm no longer interested in him. Jenny wanted to say something, but suddenly her eyes widened. Eric hurriedly came over from my side and pulled her up angrily, saying, Are you crazy? Who told you to come find her? Jenny's face turned pale, but she stubbornly replied, What's wrong with me finding her? You two are divorced, why are you still thinking about her? You were the one who told me that she has a boring personality, always revolving around you, and that you were annoyed by her. Eric froze, then turned to look at me. I nonchalantly crossed my arms. I've heard these words too many times, and they no longer hurt me. Gritting his teeth, Eric said, You're insane. It's none of your business what happens between me and her. We haven't gotten married. We haven't divorced yet. Jenny looked at him in shock, her eyes welling up with tears. We were the ones who got together first, and you said you couldn't forget about me, didn't you? Eric, have you forgotten our past? The past is already gone. Eric grabbed her arm tightly. I have a wife. I have nothing to do with you, he stared at Jenny, enunciating each word. I'm warning you, don't come looking for her again, or I won't be polite to you. Tears finally fell from Jenny's eyes. She looked at Eric for a long time before forcing a bitter smile. Eric, you're ruthless. She forcefully pulled her hand away and ran out of the coffee shop with red eyes. Eric pulled me out of the coffee shop. He remained silent for a while before speaking. I'm sorry. You were right. Initially, I did have the intention of reconciling with Jenny. At that time, I was young and couldn't accept being dumped, so when she came back, I always wanted her to see how successful I'd become and make her regret it. I mistook that obsession for love. He rubbed his face and whispered, now I understand. That I haven't loved her for a long time. I didn't know when it started snowing. The snowflakes falling gently on Eric's shoulders, but he seemed unaware, only wearing a bitter smile. After you said those words that day, I thought about it for a long time. When I got home, I realized that I'm the one who's truly worthless. I felt like I can't live without you, that you can't leave me, so I hurt you recklessly, even looked down on you. But now, thinking about it, you just love someone. Your love is pure, wholehearted, and noble. I'm the one who's truly despicable. In the distance, a street lamp lit up. A snowflake fell on his eyelashes, quickly turning into a glistening droplet of water. His voice lowered. After you left home, there was no one to make me soup. When my stomach ached, I wanted to take medicine but couldn't find it. I wanted to buy it but realized I didn't even know the names of the medications. Now I realize it's actually me who can't live without you. I feel restless every day. I don't like this feeling of confusion, but I truly don't know what I should be doing. The bedsheet is so cold, it scares me. Eric covered his face, let out a bitter laugh, and hoarsely said, so it turns out I've already fallen in love with you. He said so many words, which surprised me. When he was with me, Eric was always stingy with his responses, leaving me to perform a one-woman show. It turns out he could speak so much. It's just that it came at the wrong time, and I no longer wanted to listen. I reached out and caught a snowflake, cool and melting in my palm. Eric, you don't love me. You just feel uncomfortable with the person who has always been by your side leaving. You're just scared that no one will love you like I do. I turned around to leave, but Eric grabbed me. He slightly bowed his body, his expression almost becoming humble. Diana, please. Eric, have never begged anyone in my life, but I'm begging you. Give me another chance, please. I was wrong before. I didn't know how important you already were in my heart. I pulled his hand away, interrupting him. Eric, no one will wait for you in the same place forever. I'm not your parents. They only have one son, you. But for me, there are many men. Eric stood there for a long time, calling out to me loudly with a hint of heart-wrenching pain in his voice. Diana. In the midst of the swirling snow, he was dressed lightly, his eyes gradually turning red. I won't divorce. I turned back calmly and said, then I will file for divorce. Eric, you look so pathetic. Don't be like a dog. It was as if his throat had suddenly been choked. He stared at me, his expression filled with sorrow and regret. A tear abruptly fell from his eyes. These were the words he said to me during the divorce, now returned to him for tat. I finally understood him. When you don't love someone, hurtful words can easily slip out. He finally regretted it. Unfortunately, the right answer came too late, and it had already become a mistake. Chapter 8. Eric ended up in the hospital again due to excessive drinking. His friend called me in a panic, saying, sister-in-law, please, I'm begging you. Eric drank all night, and no matter how we tried to persuade him, it didn't work. Can you please come and see if he's okay? I hesitated for a moment and replied, I'm sorry, I have a meeting today, and I don't have the time. He kept calling your name and crying, apologizing to you, his friend defended him. He truly loves you. How can you be so heartless? I let out a cold laugh. When I was suffering from acute appendicitis and in unbearable pain, he was having dinner with Jenny outside. I called him multiple times, but he refused to answer. In the end, I had to call an ambulance to save myself. The doctor said that if I had come any later, they might not have been able to save me, my intestines had already perforated. But when Eric found out, he only responded lightly, okay, got it. It was at that moment that the last trace of love I had for him died. I finally realized that no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't warm his stone-cold heart. When it comes to being heartless, I can only admit defeat to him. I clenched my fist, remained silent, and hung up the phone. The love I once yearned for, after a long time, I discovered that it had expired. I no longer wanted it at all. His parents then called me from a different number. Eric's mother, who used to be so domineering, was now crying and pleading. Diana, Eric really likes you. We were wrong before. Can we compensate you in the future? Wedding dowry, whatever you say, we won't argue. I couldn't help but find it funny. I really don't understand why human nature is so despicable. When they are in need of you, they only see you as cheap. But when they realize you might leave, they realize they have nothing to rely on. Just come and see Eric. His gastric bleeding is severe. When he passed out, he kept muttering your name. His mother sobbed uncontrollably. I used to hear that Eric would be in agony whenever he had stomach pain, but now I just felt annoyed. I hung up the phone, picked up my meeting materials, and entered the conference room. What was I doing all this time? Even if he drinks himself to death now, I won't shed a single tear for him. I thought that with Eric's condition, he probably wouldn't be able to bother me anymore, but I didn't expect him to show up 3 days later. His face was pale and haggard, and he had lost weight. He looked at me, wanting to say something, but in the end, he remained silent. He didn't bother me anymore. He just signed a new agreement. All the assets were to be given to me, and he would leave with nothing. Just consider it as giving me a chance to atone, so that I can have the face to pursue you again, he said with a bitter smile. I shook my head inside softly. If only we had known better back then. Why did it have to be like this? Once upon a time, I also wanted to live happily with you, he said. I had given my all to love this person. I laid bare everything I had in front of him, begging him to just look at me. I tried my best, but now that I didn't get the desired outcome, I have regrets, but no regrets. Eric kept his head down for a long time and whispered softly, I was foolish. I could have been happy. Once it's a pity that I only realize the worth when I lose it. From now on, he cautiously asked, can I still contact you? Perhaps fearing that he was being bothersome, he quickly added, I won't disturb you all the time, just give me a chance to know if you're doing well. No need, I smiled at him. The past is already in the past. We should both move forward. However, I tidied his tie one last time. When you meet someone who loves you in the future, don't treat them the way you treated me. There's nothing wrong with loving someone, but the person being loved shouldn't trample on others' feelings, because love is precious. You never know when it might disappear. Eric's expression was unpleasant, as if the words I just spoke had turned into a knife, stabbing him fiercely. With a light heart, I couldn't see his expression. I could only hear his voice filled with a faint pain, choked with emotion. All right. Well then, goodbye, and I wish you happiness. I waved goodbye to him. Diana, he suddenly called out to me in a broken voice. Diana, I can't be happy without you. Suppressing the sourness in my heart, I didn't turn back but walked confidently towards the sunlight. When I love someone, it's with great passion, openness, and I give everything I have. But when I no longer love, I never look back. Everything from the past has dissipated. I won't look back. I will only continue moving forward. Mi divorci del hombre del que había estado enamorada durante 10 años. En el séptimo año de amar en secreto a Eric, mi dijo, casamonos. En el tercer año después de casarnos, lo dije, divorcimonos. Capítulo 1. En el décimo año de amar a Eric, saca relucir el tema del divorcio. Todo comenzó cuando él no llegó a casa después del trabajo. Conjugaste su empresa para encontrarlo y los 6 de pie con una chica fuera del edificio. La reconoce de inmediato como su exnovia, que había estado involucrada con Eric durante 5 años. Estaban de pie en las escaleras, Eric luciendo guapo con su traje, y la chica con su cabello ondulado luciendo encantadora y cariñosa. Aunque no se tomaron de la mano en esa abrazaron, había una intimidad que mantenía a los demás a raya. Mayer nuestro historial de chat. El último mensaje que lo envié fue, ¿vendrás a casa a cenar esta noche? Nunca respondió. Había estado ignorando mis mensajes por un tiempo, siempre afirmando que estaba ocupado, pero aparentemente, no estaba demasiado ocupado como para charlar con otra chica. No me acerca ellos. Solo me quedé allí observando en silencio. La sonrisa de Eric me parecía desconocida. De repente, me di cuenta de que no me había sonreído genuinamente durante mucho tiempo. A pesar de ser el esposo más cercano, siempre regresaba a casa con una expresión fría en su rostro. Pensé que era porque estaba cansado del trabajo, pero resultó que yo ya no era quien podía hacerlo sonreír. Me miró con indiferencia y su expresión se congeló. Luego le dijo algo a la chica. Su sonrisa se desvaneció y ella lo saludó con la mano antes de mirarme y alejarse. Eric se acercó rápidamente, abrió la puerta del auto y se sentó en el asiento del pasajero con el seno fruncido. ¿Qué estás haciendo aquí? Exclamó. Respondí con calma, vine a recoger después del trabajo. ¿No dijiste que no dejarías que Jenny entrara en nuestra compañía? Eric frunció aún más el seno. Jenny es licenciada en Yale y lleva años trabajando en el Banco de Inversiones de Wall Street. ¿Dónde más puedes encontrar a alguien como ella? ¿Por qué no la dejaría venir? Se impacientó. ¿Puedes dejar de pensar solo en el amor y el romance todo el tiempo? Mira en lo que se ha convertido ahora. Varias empresas están compitiendo por contratarla. Si no fuera por mi conexión con ella, tal vez ni siquiera hubiera venido. Su destino era evidente en sus palabras. Mirar los coches que pasaban a lo lejos sin decir una palabra. Cuando llegamos a casa, Eric tampoco me habló. Cerró la puerta del estudio de un portazo. Estaba enfadado. No se daba cuenta de que solo usaba la IRA como excusa cuando se sentía culpable. Tal vez solo yo, que había estado a su lado durante 10 años, podía entenderlo de esta manera. Pero a veces me odio por entenderlo tan bien. Y es mejor estar confundido que estar dolorosamente consciente. Ninguno de los dos habló primero y no armó una escena como solía hacer. Simplemente nos enzarzamos en una guerra fría, separados por una puerta cerrada. Después de un momento, la puerta del estudio se abrió a la fuerza y Eric, con una expresión severa, dijo, ¿qué quieres después de todo? Te lo digo, no puedo despedir a Jenny. O lo aceptas o nos divorciamos. Quien quiera que sea, ambos podemos sobrevivir el uno sin el otro. Diana, déjame decirte, lo interrumpí, hablando suavemente. No hay necesidad de despedirla. Vamos a divorciarnos. Eric hizo una pausa. ¿Qué dijiste? Parecía reírse de IRA, con un dejo de burla en las comisuras de los ojos y los labios. Diana, no estoy bromando contigo. Ya has tenido suficiente. No hay discusión sobre Jenny. No me amenazas ahora y vuelvas llorando después de saberlo, como un perro. Eric siempre hablaba sin pelos en la lengua. La primera vez que discutió conmigo de esta manera, lo en la habitación todo el día, sintiendo como si me rompiera el corazón. Pero ahora, solo había un leve dolor en mi corazón, rápidamente reemplazado por entumecimiento. No discutí con él. Saqué el acuerdo de divorcio de mi bolsa y lo puse sobre la mesa. Ya he firmado el acuerdo. La casa es para ti, el dinero y el auto son para mí, divididos aproximadamente en partes iguales. Si tienes alguna otra petición, podemos discutirla. Eric se quedó en silencio. Me miró con incredulidad, luego ese asombro se convirtió en ira. Agarró el acuerdo agresivamente y lo miró con frialdad. Bien, tienes galas, Diana. Una vez que firme, no hay vuelta atrás. Piénsalo bien. Lo entregué el bolígrafo. El rostro de Eric se oscureció de inmediato. Me arrebató bruscamente el bolígrafo de la mano y rápidamente firmó su nombre en él, luego me arrojó el acuerdo a la cara. Mañana nos divorciamos. Mañana, exclamó enojado. El que no vea es un maldito perdo asentí. Mañana por la mañana a las 9 o'clock. Ya he concertado una cita. Hizo una pausa y no dije nada. Cerré la puerta y volví al dormitorio de invitados. Podía oír el sonido de cosas que se rompían fuera de la puerta, así que me cubrí los ojos con el brazo. ¿Cómo había llegado a esto? Claramente, al principio yo también quería ser feliz. Capítulo 2 Eric y yo tuvimos un matrimonio fugaz. Para él, esta relación fue inesperada. En realidad, yo lo amaba en secreto desde hacía 5 años. En ese momento, él acababa de romper con Jenny. Cuando estaban juntos, nunca me atrevía a interferir. Fue solo después de que rompieron que tuve el courage de asistir a las reuniones en las que él estaba presente. Durante una reunión de ex-alumnos, bebió mucho y terminó emborrachándose. Sabía que era por Jenny. En ese momento, Jenny acababa de recibir su carta de aceptación de la Universidad de Yale. Pero Eric se había hecho cargo de la empresa de su padre y planeaba desarrollarla en el país. No pudieron convencerse mutuamente y, después de una acalorada discusión, la pareja que había estado enamorada durante 5 años tomó caminos separados. Al salir, varios amigos que sabían que siempre me había gustado me insinuaron que lo enviara a casa. No tuve más remedio que llamar a un auto y apoyarlo, luchando por llevarlo de regreso a casa. No importaba lo bien que estuviera el físico de Eric, seguía siendo un hombre alto de más de 1,80 m, lo que me presionaba hacia abajo, lo que me impedía alcanzar el interruptor de la luz. En la oscuridad, me dijo arrastrando las palabras al oído, J. No podía oír con claridad debido a mi aturdimiento y pensé que estaba diciendo mi nombre. Con el calor de la barraca rondando mis oídos, mi cuerpo se puso rígido y cuando se inclinó para darme un beso, no lo esquivé. Temprano a la mañana siguiente, mientras Eric todavía dormía, salí apresuradamente de su casa. Él tampoco así comunicó conmigo. Justo cuando pensaba que era solo un encuentro fugaz, un mes después, mis periodos no habían llegado. Me aseguré de que solo había sido una vez, no podía ser una coincidencia. Pero después de hacer la prueba, 2 líneas. Me tomé un día libre y me quedé en casa y finalmente reuní el courage para enviarle a Eric un mensaje de WeChat. No quería obligarlo a nada, y tampoco quería pedir el dinero. Simplemente sentí que este era nuestro hijo y que tenía derecho a saberlo. Durante un día y una noche, Eric no me respondió. Justo cuando había perdido toda esperanza, de repente me llamó. En la llamada, su voz no transmitía emoción alguna. Yo me hice cargo. Diana, Casamonos. Todavía recuerdo la sensación que tuve cuando escuché esas palabras de él. Fue la primera vez que me di cuenta de lo que significaba realmente el alivio del corazón. Como se en mi corazón explotar en fuegos artificiales, me sentí incluso más merecido que ganar el premio gordo. Reprimiendo mi abrumadora alegría, fingí estar tranquilo y le pregunté, ¿te gustó? No quiero que estés conmigo solo porque te sientes responsable. Respondió sin responder directamente. Eric permaneció en silencio durante un largo rato y luego dijo, no lo pienses demasiado. Ir a buscarte más tarde. Después de colgar el teléfono, aprieté fuertemente mis manos y mi mente se llenó de recuerdos de ese joven entusiasta en la cancha de baloncesto de la escuela secundaria. El amor no conoce razones, solo así profundiza. No sé exactamente cuándo empecé a simpatizar con Eric, ese fue cuando sixo el sudor brillante en su frente mientras jugaba al baloncesto o cuando sonrió y puso un té de burbujas en mi escritorio, diciendo, hermano, este es por mi cuenta. Todo lo que sé es que me ha gustado durante demasiado tiempo. Es como una persona que vaga sola en la oscuridad y finalmente vi la primera luz del amanecer. Aunque su madre me despreciaba porque me quedé embarazada antes del matrimonio y ni siquiera nos dio una dot ni aceptó mi té para la ceremonia de cambio de domicilio, aunque finalmente no pudimos quedarnos con ese niño, pero en ese momento, realmente me sentí la persona más feliz del mundo. Estar con él convirtió toda la amargura en dulzura. Que tonto fui. En la oscuridad, una sonrisa amarga apareció en la comisura de mi boca. No sabía que, en solo 3 cortos años, el sueño se haría añicos. Capítulo 3 la mañana siguiente, ya había hecho las maletas y estaba lista para pero Eric todavía no se había levantado. Golpeé la puerta un rato antes de que él la abriera, con un pijama gris y una mirada de impaciencia en su rostro. ¿Tienes tanta prisa? Mire mi reloj. Si llegamos tarde, tendremos que reprogramar. Hice una pausa por un momento. ¿Has estado hablando de divorciar todo este tiempo, y ahora finalmente está sucediendo, no estás feliz? Estoy feliz, forzo una sonrisa con los dientes apretados. Por supuesto que estoy feliz. Jenny también ha regresado, y eres bastante considerada, encontrando un nuevo lugar justo a tiempo. Asentí. Vámonos entonces. En el camino, ninguno de los dos dijo una palabra. Eric tenía un seno fruncido constante en su rostro, y yo me había acostumbrado a eso. No sé exactamente cuándo comenzó, pero rara vez hablábamos. Al principio, me encantaba hablar con él. Después de gustar durante tantos años, había acumulado tantas palabras que quería compartir con él. Si veía un gato en la carretera, una flor hermosa o una nube de forma peculiar en el cielo, lo enviaba fotos. Pero rara vez respondía. Por lo general, tardaba mucho en comunicarse conmigo cuando necesitaba algo y, de mala gana, respondía con un simple sí. No podía engañarme a mí misma. Simplemente no era una persona habladora por naturaleza, porque había visto las conversaciones que tenía con Jenny en sus redes sociales, y parecía que Eric se había vuelto una persona que no reconoce, alguien ingenioso y divertido que respondía instantáneamente a todos sus temas. Con el tiempo, dejé de enviar mensajes con tanta frecuencia. Cuando llegamos a la oficina de asuntos civiles, la mediadora, una señora mayor, intentó reconciliarnos durante mucho tiempo. ¿Y es irreparable su relación? Eric estaba a punto de hablar, pero sonreí y respondí, no. Tuvimos un matrimonio fugaz sin ninguna base emocional para empezar. Ahora parece inapropiado y no podemos seguir así. Eric me miró con expresión complicada. La mediadora intentó persuadirnos durante un rato, pero bloqueó todos sus intentos. Finalmente, suspiró y dijo, comencé un mes de reflexión y piénsenlo de nuevo. Las parejas jóvenes como ustedes, con el talento del hombre y la belleza de la mujer, son tan bien emparejjadas. Ustedes los jóvenes son simplemente impulsivos. Vuelven atrás y piensan más en los aspectos buenos de cada uno. Lo pense. Eric es guapo, fue el galán de la escuela en la secundaria. Él viene de una buena familia, sus padres son dueños de una empresa y tienen mucho dinero. En la universidad, solía recoger a Jenny de la escuela en su auto deportivo, mientras que nosotros todavía tomábamos el autobús. Tiene una buena personalidad, está rodeado de un grupo de amigos y nunca hay un momento aburrido. Y es una buena persona, excepto cuando se trata de mí. Me trata mal. Cuando salimos de la oficina de asuntos civiles, la luz del sol del mediodía atravesó mis ojos, provocando que se me llenaran los ojos de lágrimas. Eric pensó que estaba llorando y finalmente reveló una sonrisa de satisfacción. ¿Te arrepientes ahora? Demasiado tarde, Diana, se paró frente a mí con una postura condescendiente, las manos en los bolsillos. No dar marca atrás. Ni siquiera el rabillo del ojo y condujo a casa con él. Una vez que llegamos a casa, Eric se sentó en el sofá con las piernas cruzadas y, por costumbre, me dio órdenes, tráeme un vaso de agua. Lo ignoré y salí del dormitorio con mi maleta en la mano. ¿A dónde vas? Frunció el seno. Encontré un nuevo lugar y me voy a mudar hoy. Hice una pausa por un momento y continuó. Guard todas las cosas que me compraste en el armario del dormitorio. ¿A quién diablos lo importa? Eric explotó de repente. Force una sonrisa. Ya que nos vamos a divorciar, despidámonos como es debido. Cuidate. Bebe menos alcohol, tu estómago no está bien. ¿Quién te crees que eres, ocupando de mis asuntos? Se levantó abruptamente, agarró mi maleta, abrió la puerta y la arrojó afuera. Si te vas, vete ahora. Sus sejas ese franciran, sus ojos ese lenaron de ira reprimida. Mayer la maleta en el suelo, aturdida por un momento. Luego dejé de hablar, me acerc, recogí la maleta y entré al ascensor sin mirarlo. La mirada detrás de mi era abrasadora, como se quisiera quemarme negujero en la espalda, pero al final, fue completamente cortada por las puertas del ascensor que se cerraron. Capítulo 4. No quería la casa porque ya no quería tener nada que ver con Eric. No quería ver sus cosas, oler su aroma ni pensa en nada relacionado con él. De hecho, ya había tomado una decisión sobre el divorcio. Eric nunca lo agreed. Siempre lo supe. Simplemente seguía pensando que después de tantos años, incluso si tuviera un corazón de piedra, con el tiempo se derretiría por mí. Pero después de todos estos años, todavía no me ama y mi calidad se ha agotado por completo. Finalmente entiendo que algunas personas son realmente irreemplazables. Tal vez él puede ver la sonrisa de Jenny, pero no importa cuánto lo intente, no puede ver la mía. Me muda la casa que había alquilado anteriormente. Antes de que pudiera terminar de desempacar, la madre de Eric llamó. Eric, ¿compras la medicina para el estómago? Escuché el que su estómago no ha estado bien últimamente. No soy yo quien dice esto, Diana. Nunca estuve de acuerdo cuando Eric quiso casarse contigo. ¿Cómo puede una chica decente quedar embarazada antes del matrimonio? Si fuera mi hija, la habría golpeado hasta la muerte. Es vergonzoso. Te lo digo, nuestra familia no puede romper la línea. Si no puedes tener hijos, será mejor que lo digas pronto. Eric todavía es joven. No lo retraces. Apriete mi teléfono. La familia de Eric es rica y su madre nunca ha visto con buenos ojos a mi familia. Mis padres tuvieron que poner una cara sonriente y soportar su trato frío cuando fueron a visitarla. A lo largo de los años, ella siempre me ha desagradado, sin importar cuánto me esfuerzo por complacerla. De hecho, ella ha dicho estas cosas antes cada vez que nos encontramos. Cada vez que mi llama, repite como tripaste Eric y lo difícil que fue para su familia. Eric nunca habla por mí. Él solo me dice que sea obedient y filial con su madre porque su madre ya ha hecho muchos sacrificios para aceptarme. Así que siempre lo soporto. Pero esta vez, yo no necesito soportarlo más. Dije sin expresión, ya estamos divorciados. Ya no estoy obligada a comprar medicamentos. Por cierto, tú no me diste luz en mi criaste. No tienes derecho a entrometer en mis asuntos. Si no me soportas, te sugiero que te seques los ojos y dejes de mirar. Después de decir eso, no me importo. Escuch la reacción del otro lado y colg, bloqueando el número. Después de pensarlo un poco, abandono todos los grupos de WeChat relacionados con la familia de Eric y bloqueé toda su información de contacto, incluida la suya. Después de hacer todo esto, finalmente respiro aliviado y me acosto en la cama. El divorcio no fue tan doloroso como imaginaba. A Eric siempre le gustaba amenazarme con el divorcio durante las discusiones. Parecía que me tenía bajo su control, sabiendo que no lo digería, y usó mi amor para lastimarme sin restricciones. Y como esperaba, la primera vez que me amenazó así, realmente me asustó. Tenía razón. Me era delante el como un perro, admitiendo mis errores, prometiendo cambiar y dispuesta a hacer cualquier cosa con tal de que no me dejara. Me cubrí los ojos con las palmas de las manos, sintiendo un calor húmedo, pero incluso el dolor tiene sus límites. Repetidamente, ese dolor ese intermitio a través de la repetición interminable. La cadena que atravesó mis huesos y carne, lavando sangre podrida, finalmente me dejó. Ahora lo único que me queda es la liberación. Capítulo 5. Eric ya no me contactaba. Es como si hubiera desaparecido por completo de mi vida. Hasta que 2 semanas después, un compañero de clase se me acercó de repente y me preguntó si quería ir a la reunión de la clase mañana por la noche. Al principio, quería negarme. Realmente no quería volver a ver a Eric. Pero luego pensé que no era yo quien estaba equivocado y que tampoco tenía por qué evitarlo. Así que acepte ir durante la reunión de la clase, estaba hablando con otras personas cuando la puerta se abrió de repente. Eric entró. Todavía lavaba el traje que lavaba puesto durante el día, entalado y ajustado, con solo el botón.